Victoria Churchill is on the phone with us this morning. She's a political reporter for the Daily Mail and, of course, a commentator and a naturalized American citizen, I want to point out. Victoria, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing fine, thank you. This happened in Congress this week. It happened in the United States Congress where they tried to get a moment of silence for a major, no matter how you look at him, a major U.S. political figure who was assassinated yesterday or earlier this week, and they couldn't come to there was screaming going on in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Yeah, absolutely. So this happened when Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado asked for a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk, whose condition was unknown after he was shot while, of course, doing his campus tour in Utah. And several Democrat lawmakers, our estimates at the Daily Mail were that it was about a dozen lawmakers on the House floor, said no. And then Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, she's, a close Kirk ally. She actually worked for Turning Point at one point in her career as the director of Hispanic engagement. She spoke up and she said, y'all effing own this. She screamed that across the chamber. And, an interesting part of this was the coverage after. So CNN actually, they had House Speaker Johnson on and they cut in right to Luna's remark without the precursor. So that was actually something that I wrote up yesterday, just how some of my colleagues in the media have been covering this has been interesting. And then, of course, there's other media outlets that will call out other media outlets for how they're
right.
they're covering the post coverage of this.
Yeah, I'm trying to find something to relate it to. I mean, we are a little over a year out from an assassination attempt on an American, at that point, former American president who was a candidate for president again. And if not for the grace of God that he turned his head at the last minute, we would have had a state funeral for Donald Trump a year ago. And people just don't seem to have, this doesn't seem to have the same impact on the American public that it did in the 1960s when John Kennedy and his brother were assassinated.
Yeah, it is definitely a very interesting time to be involved in politics, to be covering politics, especially for the younger generation. I think we definitely are desensitized to a lot, but, I think this was really part of Kirk's mission, right, was actually making the younger generation pay attention, regardless of whether you were left or right. And, I think arguably actually leftists may have even paid more attention to him because they wanted to, poke fun at all of his arguments and prove him wrong. Of course, that was the title of his tour or his tables that he would set up at these college campuses was, prove me wrong. And at least from the clips that I saw on my social media feeds, they very rarely, if ever, were actually able to prove him wrong. And, again, I think this just really goes to show that his mission is connecting people. That's why he wanted to be out there. He wanted to be out there in person in all of these campuses, regardless of who came up to him. He would engage in a debate with them. During events, he would actually say, if you disagree with me, come to the front of the line, because he wanted to have that exchange of ideas.
Correct. Yeah, you don't have a right to not have your feelings hurt. And I think we've gotten away from that in America. When I hear Elizabeth Warren yesterday scoffing at the idea that she should tone down the rhetoric, when she is consistently referring to the other side as Nazis, that is, that, first of all, it's just not true, and it leads directly to tension like this.
It absolutely does, and I think it's been interesting to watch the reactions of Republicans versus Democrats. Of course, a lot of prominent Democrats, former Vice President Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, even California Governor Gavin Newsom, who, of course, just did a podcast with Kirk just a few months ago and said that his own son was actually a fan of Kirk. They, of course, condemned the incident, the violence. But, other lawmakers have been quick to point out that, they feel like they could be next. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she canceled some upcoming events that she has.
Yep.
But actually yesterday I was at an event about 2.5 hours outside of D.C. with some prominent Republican members of Congress. It was House GOP Conference Chair Lisa McClain and Representative John McGuire, who represents a part of Virginia, like I said, just about 2.5 hours outside of D.C.
Yeah.
And, they said that they wanted to carry on. And, for McClain, there was a remark that I captured where, she wanted to be out there, for her daughter, who is a young conservative, has been active on her campus. And, basically saying that the left did this because they wanted to shut the right up, and the right isn't going to shut up.
That's a great point. Victoria, I'm out of time, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Victoria Churchill with the Daily Mail there. So there you have it.